Okay, let's dive into some pretty deep wisdom today. We're looking at sources talking about, legends like Warren Buffett, Charlie Munger, and also insights from another really experienced billionaire. These aren't just people known for, well, for being incredibly wealthy. They often come up because they have this particular perspective, this kind of enduring wisdom that feels, well, really valuable.
That's right. And the sources you shared, they give us a peek into how they think. We've got lessons learned from actually being at the Berkshire Hathaway meetings, plus these direct conversations with another successful billionaire. They come at it from slightly different angles, maybe, but you see this powerful convergence on core ideas. It's
Oh,
about more than just making money, right? It's about how you build a life, a career, how you make, well, good decisions.
exactly. So our mission for this deep dive is basically to unpack all that, pull out the most, impactful bits from these different insights and figure out what they actually mean for you, the listener. Whether you're thinking about your job, personal stuff, or just like daily choices. What can we really learn from all this high-level experience? Let's get into the sources and see what stands out. So where do we even begin with minds like these? One thing that seems totally fundamental, it comes up again and again in the sources, is this intense focus on the downside.
Yes, absolutely. One source calls it loss aversion, straight up.
Hmm.
Warren Buffett apparently recommends it, not just for investing, but for life. His phrase was, heads I win, tails I don't lose much.
Right. It feels almost backwards, doesn't it? We're always told, visualize success, go for the win, but they seem to put so much energy into not making the big mistakes.
Precisely. It's about spending real effort figuring out what could go wrong, the pitfalls, the errors in judgment, the things that could be fatal to an idea or a venture, and then you build your strategy to make sure you avoid those things.
Yeah.
Charlie Munger had that great line, maybe a little morbid, but memorable, quoted in one source.
Oh, the one about dying.
Yeah. All I want to know is where I'm going to die, so I never go there.
Mm. It really highlights that focus on, identifying and steering clear of the potential disasters.
That quote really sticks with you, and the sources are clear. This isn't just stock market stuff. You can use this loss aversion thinking, like anywhere. In relationships, maybe you focus on not doing things that break trust. In business, you find the biggest risks that could sink you,
Yeah.
and you actively manage those. Career-wise, maybe it's less about just listing goals and more about avoiding paths that lead to, I don't know, burnout or stagnation.
It's a core mental model, definitely.
And tied really closely to that deliberate, almost defensive thinking is this incredible emphasis on patience. Oh, absolutely vital. Charlie Munger's quote, never interrupt the compounding, isn't just finance talk. It's a principle for growth in, well, anything that builds over time. The report from the Berkshire meeting, it mentioned they have something like, what, over $180 billion in cash just sitting there?
Yeah, a massive amount.
And Buffett's explanation for not throwing it all into the market was simple. They're waiting for the right pitch.
In today's world, with all the move fast, break things talk, that kind of patience, it's really striking. It's a good reminder that sometimes the most productive thing is actually to wait, to learn, to prepare for the real opportunity.
Rushing, as one source points out, leads to hasty decisions. And those are often the ones that cause fatal failures.
Sure.
You just can't force certain things. Some processes need time.
Mm.
Buffett's analogy, it's memorable, maybe a bit blunt.
The one about the baby.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you can't deliver a baby in 1 month by making 9 women pregnant.
No.
It makes the point, right?
Yeah.
Some things just take the time they take.
Okay, so moving beyond strategy, the sources also talked about something more internal, a kind of contentment.
Yes, that was interesting. The source that looked at the Berkshire meeting through a Zen habits lens really focused on this. It pointed out how genuinely content Buffett and Munger seem. And the author's take was that this contentment isn't just a result of being rich. It might actually help them succeed.
Huh. That's a fascinating twist. So it contributes, it's not just a consequence. What examples did that source give? How does that contentment show up?
Well, one really simple but powerful lesson was, don't worry about what everyone else is doing.
Yeah.
The source noted that part of Berkshire's edge is that they don't feel this pressure to follow the herd, chase the latest trend, and the suggestion for us, for you listening, is that constantly comparing yourself, always checking what others are up to. That's maybe one of the fastest ways to lose your own sense of direction, your inner compass, and just feel less content.
Right. And I guess if you're not worried about others, it helps to really know yourself, especially knowing your own strengths and your weaknesses.
Exactly. They're famously open about what they don't understand.
Yeah.
Like they rarely invest in complicated tech businesses because they admit it's outside their expertise.
Mm.
The source suggested that a big part of their contentment comes from being okay with that, focusing on what you're good at and letting go of needing to be an expert in, well, everything.
Okay, so we have this foundational mindset. Avoid the big losses, be incredibly patient, cultivate contentment by focusing on your own game. How does this connect to how they learn and actually, take action?
Learning seems absolutely central. It's non-negotiable.
Oh.
One source highlighted Buffett's daily routine.
Mhm.
It's kind of legendary. Spending 80% of his working day just
Sure,
reading.
50%? Wow.
Yeah, the source mentioned it's like over 6 hours, maybe more than 500 pages,
Yeah.
every single day.
That level of commitment is staggering. And I remember reading Charlie Munger apparently said he felt like he'd met people he admired just by reading their biographies and books.
It really underscores that this isn't just a hobby for them. It's the
Mm.
core work. The sources describe them as obsessive learners.
And all this learning, it builds up what they call their circle of competence, right?
Correct. And the sources stress that their big wins, their successful investments, they aren't just lucky stabs in the dark. They're the outcome of literally thousands of small learnings gathered over decades. One source put it plainly: that circle grows slowly, through reading, through learning from your mistakes, through trying things out.
Okay, so trying things. Any examples from the sources of them learning from an experiment?
Yeah, the report mentioned their experience with See's Candies. They bought it, and apparently they tried to scale it up massively across the U.S., but it didn't quite work out as planned. But crucially, they took that specific lesson about the challenges of scaling retail, and they applied that understanding later when they looked at Coca-Cola. They recognized Coke's existing huge global distribution was a massive asset, something they now understood better how to value and leverage. It reminds me of that George Patton quote one source mentioned: "He who sweats more in training bleeds less in battle."
Interesting. So it's learning through doing, even when it's not a home run. Now, what about putting all that knowledge to use? One source talked about taking simple ideas really seriously.
Yes. Someone asked Buffett, if you were 20 today, would he invest differently? And his answer was basically no. He'd still be doing the unglamorous work, like reading thousands of pages of Moody's manuals, understanding businesses from the ground up. The source really emphasized this. There are no shortcuts. Success often comes from finding a simple fundamental idea like understand the business you're investing in, and then taking that simple idea incredibly seriously, putting in the real work.
That makes sense. It connects to another point from that other billionaire source about luck versus preparation.
Right. That source acknowledged, sure, luck plays a role. Some people get luckier breaks than others. But the main point was that luck is ultimately secondary. The safer bet, the more reliable path to long-term success, is rigorous preparation. Doing the homework, understanding the principles, being really well-informed.
So maybe luck helps you stumble into the lucky room, as they put it, but being prepared is what gets you there more often, and more importantly, lets you actually recognize and act on the opportunity when it shows up.
Exactly. And part of that preparation, as that source mentioned, is actively seeking out different viewpoints, exploring various possibilities before you commit.
Okay, let's shift focus a bit again. The sources also gave us some broader perspectives, how these individuals view success itself and just, well, life.
Yeah, one really interesting take from the anonymous billionaire source was the idea success is a feeling.
A feeling, not like hitting a number or achieving a goal.
Right. The source argued that defining success just by the destination, that misses the point. A better definition maybe is the enjoyment, the fulfillment, the sense of engagement you feel while you're on the journey. Reaching the goal, the source said, that's just the cherry on the cake. The feeling during the process is what really counts.
That's food for thought. That same source brought up something about cause and effect that might be a bit hard to swallow for some people.
It did. It made the point that in many areas, business, investing, maybe even life, sometimes there's an underlying dynamic where when you profit, someone loses. It's about being aware of the polar opposite consequence that can often exist. Achieving a true win-win situation, that source suggested, is often trickier than we think and really depends on how everyone involved defines winning.
Yeah, it makes you think more about the ripple effects of your choices, doesn't it?
It definitely encourages more mindfulness there. That source also offered a very simple but profound thought for dealing with tough times, unexpected difficulties.
Oh, is that?
Just time is the best doctor.
Oh, yeah. That really lands. Things that feel totally overwhelming right now. They do change. Slowly, maybe, but they change. Time helps.
Time heals, it repairs, it teaches really fundamental lessons. It's a reminder that patience isn't just for investing, it's crucial for getting through personal struggles too. which, as the sources imply, even the most successful people absolutely face.
And that links to another point from that source, right? That these incredibly successful people are still just people.
Yes, exactly. They deal with family issues, health problems, relationship difficulties, just like anyone else. The source warned against, idolizing anyone. Because even people at the very top are often experts in just one specific area. We all have our strengths and weaknesses, and we can all learn things from each other.
Okay, circling back to Buffett for a second, one source mentioned his advice: be a proud copycat.
Hmm.
That seems to fly in the face of the usual advice about needing to be totally original.
Right, but the sources kind of clarified this. It's not about not being authentic in the long run. It's more about speed and effectiveness, especially when you're starting something new.
Yeah.
The idea is find people you really admire or ideas that are clearly working well, study them, absorb the principles, and then feel good about adopting and adapting them to get started. It gets you moving faster. Then as you learn and grow, you naturally start to personalize it, innovate on top of it.
That source gave some great examples, didn't it? Like Monish Pabray deliberately copying Buffett and Munger, Buffett being hugely influenced by Graham and Feeney, Munger learning from Ben Franklin, even huge companies. Microsoft's early software building on existing ideas, the iPhone having precursors, Tesla being an acquisition initially, McDonald's copying the brothers' system.
It really pushes back against that myth that every success has to be a completely novel invention out of thin air. Learning from, adopting, and adapting what works. That's a totally valid and often very effective strategy.
And there was also that consistent theme across different sources about living simply, despite having, unimaginable wealth.
Yeah, both reports touching on the Berkshire meeting mentioned Buffett's famously modest life. Same house for decades, drives himself in a regular car, eats at normal places. The Zen Habit source pointed out he could afford any luxury imaginable, but he chooses not to. Why? Because he seems to genuinely know what he likes, and he finds contentment in those simpler things.
And that little detail about Charlie Munger from one source about never complaining about food, just eating what's put in front of him.
It's another small example, isn't it? That kind of simple acceptance, lack of fuss. It ties back to that contentment idea. Know what you actually enjoy and don't waste energy worrying about all the other things you could be having or doing or what others have.
Okay, nearly there. The sources also touched on just fundamental human stuff, relationships, kindness.
Yes, one source was very direct. Having reliable, trusted friends and partners is really important for a happy, long life. And Buffett's often quoted advice on marriage. Marry the best person you can find who will actually have you. Simple, but profound.
And that other point, just incredibly simple. The world would be better if people aimed to be kinder than richer.
Good perspective check, isn't it? And finally, on purpose. One source included Buffett's advice here. Find a job that you would like to do, even if you didn't have a job. What's the work you'd do anyway, just for the love of doing it?
Wow. Okay, we have definitely covered a lot of ground today, pulling all this from the source material you shared. We've looked at these mindsets focusing hard on the downside, cultivating deep patience, the absolute necessity of constant learning, reading, experimenting, strategic moves like being okay with copying, taking simple things super seriously, and then these bigger life perspectives, success as a feeling, the power of simplicity, cause and effect, the importance of relationships, kindness.
Yeah, these insights, drawn straight from those reports and conversations, they offer a really rich picture. It's this blend, isn't it? Very practical, strategic thinking for navigating the world, combined with a kind of philosophy for living a more fulfilled and content life internally.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the wisdom from these very successful people, it feels like the core lessons aren't just about getting rich, not at all. They're about being intentional, being patient, constantly learning, and really cultivating perspective on what actually matters.
The sources seem to show again and again that lasting success, and maybe even more importantly, that sense of contentment, often comes from mastering the basics, being incredibly prepared, and developing a certain kind of internal mindset. It's not just about chasing the next external win.
Right. So here's something for you to think about as you go, kind of pulling together a couple of these threads we talked about. Given that these highly successful folks emphasize taking simple ideas very seriously, and they believe strongly in continuous improvement, often by identifying and working on weak spots.
The question for you might be, what one simple idea or fundamental principle could you commit to taking more seriously in your own life or work, starting maybe even today? Or thinking about where you are now versus where you'd like to be. So one specific weak area that you could realistically focus on improving consistently over the next few months.
Yeah, think about that. What's that one simple thing you could lean into or one area you could start working on right now?